Welcome everyone to 2025. Happy New Year to everyone, and to also our weekly conversation here at this SDN Community Voices, our weekly touch point between you, the members and the followers of the Service Design Network, and all those amazing voices that we have around service design and the related disciplines. My name is Felipe, and as always, I will be your ambassador and host. And today I'm very excited to bring Aditi to the conversation to talk a little bit more about the intersection between design and IT. And I'll bring her to the stage and ask her to introduce herself instead. Hey, welcome.
Hi, Felipe.
So, a quick introduction to who you are, how did you get to service design, and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Aditi, and I'm originally from India. The journey to service design was actually pretty long and quite a roller coaster, to be honest. I initially actually studied architecture, and that's where my bachelor studies lie. As a part of that, I realized I really had a niche for research. I really enjoyed doing the little research projects that came across while I was pursuing my bachelor's, which led me to do my first master's, which was doing design by research, during which I did different kinds of research, for example, with materials, with topics, eventually building across gender studies and intersection of architecture as my final research project, which
Mhm.
built a very strong foundation for me for user research and how that plays out in different facets in architecture and outside fields associated with it. I worked as a design consultant briefly, and I realized, well, there is something more that needs to be added to the work that I was doing. And that led me to discovering more about design thinking, service design, and eventually pursuing business innovation and strategic design from Politecnico di Milano. And that somehow brought me here to Siemens Healthineers in Germany. And here I work as an innovation expert within IT. I do not have, as you can see, any background or work in terms of IT specifically, but there's a huge scope of the work that I have done in the past that brings me a great value in the job that I do today.
Yeah, and I think there's such a good intersection there, even though a lot of times it's not very well taught about it. But design and IT, in terms of processes and things like that, agile methodologies and design thinking, they kind of clash in some ways, right? So how does it work for you as a innovation expert there to bring this design perspective a little bit into IT and the other way around also?
Mhm. I think in terms of expert, I see myself more as a curious person from a point of innovation in IT rather than an
Mhm.
expert, because a big part of the work that I do actually starts with being curious about what is it that the teams here are talking about. Because anything that I do in my everyday work almost always comes in with a new process, a new tool, or the work that I see, which meets in a lot of areas that I have no expertise or knowledge in previously, which puts me in a good spot because it allows me to ask questions like, what is it that we are discovering here? Why are we talking about such topics? What does that specific term mean? And if it comes down to it, isn't that what's discovering or using design thinking methodologies is about? Breaking down everything to a point where it becomes simpler and clearer so that we can walk through the process and see where does the real scope for new ideas, curiosities, and other topics lie. That's the kind of work that I'm doing every day. And this is not just specific to tools and processes, it also comes quite hand in hand with the work that we do, which is people centered as well. When we are formulating strategies, building teams, understanding challenges for people in everyday front, all of these questions and methods become extremely relevant in those spaces as well. And that's where I feel the fact that not being from the field of IT becomes super helpful, because as a designer, you can bring in your questions and be the outsider that allows to see the inside picture more clearly.
Yeah. And I think what you said, being curious, I think that really stuck with me. I think it's a lot of times very important, right? In terms of creativity, curiosity. A lot of times I think design is a little bit closer to that kind of curiosity area per se. But sometimes we get stuck into those tools and processes and we forget about being curious and learning about new things. So, then my question maybe is a little bit, what are some things that you learned throughout the way of being curious in IT and that you started implementing into your design on day to day?
Very good question, Felipe. I think outright, I would say yes, of course, tools and processes and technologies that are being uncovered in IT in everyday work that makes the backbone of work moving forward. Of course, those were the things I was very curious about. But on the other side, what really opened door for me was, what are the people like who are working in IT? Because in terms of the work that we pursue, it highly shapes the way we see ourselves within an organization, within a team, within the work that we are pursuing. For me, the next layer of curiosity was understanding who are the people making these things happen, because that brought me a little bit closer to what their frustrations are, what their challenges are, what their aspirations are, what their expectations are. Because it's important to remember behind behind every process, every success that we see or failures going on, there are people behind that making it happen. What are these people? Where can I meet them? That was the real challenge for me, because not only did I have to sort of shape the way that I formulate my conversations with them, it also had a huge impact in the way that I talk about design processes with them, because
Yeah.
it's like speaking two different languages. So I
Mm,
had to really understand what their language was like, what their thought process was like, and what I could do to make them meet halfway, and
mm.
vice versa. How could I make it easier for them to meet me halfway? Because if we are just speaking two different languages, it makes the process all the way more complicated.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's so easy for us to create terms and tools and processes, and then we have to name them, of course. So we
Yeah,
have kind of a structure, but then you get into maybe another field or another company, another corporation. They have slightly different names for the same thing, and then
hmm,
you maybe stay 30 minutes talking about the same thing, but you're disagreeing instead of agreeing, right? So it's like this awkward kind
absolutely.
of speaking different language situation, as you're saying.
Absolutely. I can give you an example. This one time we were working, it was a very complex environment. It was very dynamic. There were a lot of things getting discussed at the stage of the design process that we were all along. And I kind of had the feeling that some people had different understanding of the way that we were going about the changes, or we were going about the topic. So instead of moving forward right away and pushing through, we took a quick stop and asked everybody, can everybody take a piece of paper and just draw or write out how you are perceiving what we are doing right now? Even if it means establishing transparency in the process, can you tell me what that looks like? With 20 people in the room, we got 20 different responses. And that is exactly what we want to clarify, right? There is nothing wrong with it, absolutely
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it. But that is a point that needs to be acknowledged. What is it that might be hindering us moving forward? Even the simplest of terms or simplest of circumstances that we might be seeing ourselves in might not be giving the same picture to everybody. So, how can
Yeah.
we establish that picture clearly first?
Yeah, and I think that comes to perception, right? Everybody's going to have slightly different perceptions based on their biases, on their cultural upbringings, on what they think it's right or wrong, and things like that. So you probably will never have a room where everybody's agreeing exactly on the same thing. But as you're saying, you're trying to bring everybody halfway, so then
Mhm,
you start having at least a common language to talk
mhm.
to them about something.
Absolutely. And I love the rooms where actually nobody agrees on anything. Because I remember us saying, forgive me, I don't know who said it, if everybody is thinking the same thing, then clearly somebody is not thinking. So it's
Mm,
really important that different views are brought into the room, because they allow us to challenge or even look at the same thing from a different perspective, and then
yeah.
make a more informed call or an informed decision. If everybody agrees, that kind of sends the message, who is making that decision really? Or
Mm.
is everybody understanding that decision clearly? Because it has to be absolutely clear, or something so unclear that might not be getting addressed right away. So the broader the views, the more enriched the discussion.
Yeah, sometimes you need to be like the devil's advocate,
Yeah,
even though everybody's agreeing. You're like, but wait a minute, maybe there's something we're missing, as you're saying, right?
could be, yeah.
Is there an example from your time now at Siemens that you realize that happening, like the very disagreement room, and then somebody like picked up the conversation and tried to bring each other other direction, and how did they do that?
I think that's one of the key things that I enjoy as a facilitator in these discussions. I think people in the room have very vast knowledge of the topic that they're working on. They, of course, they know much more intensely than I ever can on the work that they are doing pretty much every day. The
Mm,
only role that I see myself bringing in these situations is, how can it be more structured or unstructured enough to make them question the status quo? And in
mm,
these situations, it's just as if you're lifting the veil of, oh, that's something we have not been seeing so far. Can we take a closer look at it? And these are the discussions I'm happily taking a step back, because people are now ready to step in and say, yeah, I have thought about it. I might have different thoughts or ideas how to make it easier. Or there are certain challenges I see coming up. How can we address them in the future? These are crucial points where insights start to become something that we can take forward into the design process.
Mm,
Because finding a problem and solving it is, of course, easy and much, much easier done. But when we start to see things with insights that have not been brought in the design challenges before, this is where discussions become really intense.
yeah.
Getting there becomes a little bit tricky because you need to really understand what is going on, what has been happening behind the scenes that the team has not seen so far. But more often than not, that point does arrive, and I believe those are the points that are very crucial to the flow all along.
Yeah, it becomes that point of inflection, right, when you're actually starting to
Exactly.
be creative. And I think it's very interesting what you're saying, right? To be as a facilitator, you have to know when you are stepping in, but also
Hmm.
when you should step out and just
Hmm.
let it flow because people understood already what they're supposed to do, and they start becoming more aware of the situation. So how do you think about like this balance of stepping in and stepping out as a facilitator?
I think initially it was a really tricky one to identify for myself
Mm,
because it's easy to carry the burden of being the person who's going to take everything forward, find all the solutions, make the best awesome workshop they have ever seen. Well, it took me some time to realize that was an expectation I had for myself, not the rest of the room did. And as soon as I had an acknowledgement of that, the work that I did afterwards became much easier
mm,
because I realized my role was to bring clarity to the room in the way that had not been addressed before. That's why they have called somebody from outside of that discussion to help them. So my prime focus lies in where can I help them get a little bit of closer insight of something they have not seen before,
mm,
acknowledging things in the room that people know but don't want to talk about. For example, the elephant in the room. Sometimes topics can be a bit troublesome. Let's acknowledge we are humans at the end of the day. There are a lot of emotions involved with the topics that we work with, the people that we work with, the work that we do that we are passionate about. How can I acknowledge that and use that to take the conversation forward? And
mm.
lastly, understanding, helping understand people, the power actually lies with them, not with me. At the end of the day, they are the ones who are working on this. It's their work, it's their process, it's their tool, it's their solution, it's their work that they
Yeah.
will be taking forward.
And
How
as you
can
said, they are the experts also of their field,
exactly.
right? So you're just trying to facilitate the conversation there.
Exactly. So creating a room where they feel, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Now I know how to move forward. And it comes on naturally in the discussion where you can see yourself. Now people are feeling like, okay, this is something we can move forward with. And I'm more than happy in those situations to take a step back.
Mm. So it becomes creating a space of safety also. So no, people know that they have this space to discuss and to create something instead of
Mhm.
just being stuck on the same thing that maybe they don't feel safe getting out of a little bit.
Absolutely. And also acknowledging the fact that we might not have all the answers right away.
Mm.
Because that is another big expectations that people have when we sit down for any form of discussion. Well, this 1 hour is going to solve my 10 years of problems. It might not. It might not. But it will help you come a little bit closer to where you want to be. And
Mm.
creating that environment where it's okay to not walk away with everything, but walk away with something that's valuable enough to take the next step.
Mm. But in today's world, a lot of times people want answers very, very quickly, right? Because of the whole industrial mindset of getting things done and things like that. How do you get people being comfortable with walking to the unknown, of not
Mhm.
knowing if they even going to get answers? You know, sometimes you go into a creative process, and you might get answers, but not answers to your questions. So maybe you get
Mhm.
other answers. So how do you get people comfortable with this kind of unknown like spot there on the process?
I think the one of the easiest ways that I found to make people comfortable with that is to talk about everything but that. So
Mm,
when we are starting off a discussion, what we often do is, all right, everybody, I'm new to you, you are new to me. Let's talk about a couple of things to get ourselves comfortable in the space. And we often do, for example, some exercises, some games to get us started. And I will not touch upon the topic right away because I know they're already charged to talk about it. Well, I'm going to do this topic today. I'm going to solve topics today. For 10 to 15 minutes, let's create an environment where it's okay to first be human in the room
mm,
because let's talk about let's get ourselves comfortable. Let's find a place where you're okay sitting working. For example, one of the things that I often do is if you're sitting next to somebody, well, pick a seat that's not next to somebody you're already sitting next to. So
Mm.
you change your positions, and of course, you can see people like, oh my God, I have to change where I'm sitting. I have to take all my stuff. And more often than not, I ask the question, is this making you uncomfortable? I know it is. I am uncomfortable asking you that. I know that
Mhm.
you are uncomfortable as well. But there's another thing that's happening while you are a little bit uncomfortable with that. It's a change. It brought you to some place you were not before, but it also brought you next to somebody you weren't thinking about sitting next to today. So
Yeah,
how
exactly.
about we talk to the other person? How about we get to know a little bit more?
Mm.
And after those 5 minutes, people are often happy that, oh, I didn't know that Maria was doing so and so work in the work, or I didn't know John was doing so much so and so work. And now that's how we pick up the rest of the day. Doing
Yeah.
something we haven't done before, but we might find something interesting by the end of it.
Yeah,
And
and it's such a little gesture, right? Changing the chairs in the room so people are not sitting right next to people that they already know, but already puts on the mindset of, okay, we're here to do these little changes, and little by little, we're going to understand the answers, and we start like getting the questions, right?
absolutely, because at the bottom of this, Felipe, the one thing is, well, we are all scared of change. I am
Mm.
scared of change. I'm pretty sure people out there are also very scared of change because we don't know what's going to come after it.
Mm.
But if we don't move, we wouldn't know. So, how can you lower the threshold of embracing that change in your own time and space, which you are comfortable with? Sometimes it comes smaller pieces, sometimes it comes bigger, but it has to move for something to change. And that's the momentum we try to build in the work that we do.
Yeah, 100%. And with some people, probably they are more, I say, more restrict themselves more to change or to innovation than others. Um,
Mhm.
how do you kind of balance this? People that are more prone to trying something new, to change, to try to innovate, and people that are
Mhm.
a little bit more s- uh, just static on where they
Mhm.
are.
I think it's all about expectations.
Mhm.
People who are wishing for a change also come with a huge set of expectations that I know nothing is working and I want to change that. And on the other end of the spectrum is I know nothing is going to change, there's no point trying it. The question here is what is it that they have met before that I can bring them forward to that have that's something they have not tried in the past and we can try a little bit differently. So the
Mm.
expectation here oftentimes is I'm not going to give you the answers or to the changes right away that's going to radically change the way you work. No. Can we start small? Can we start a little bit closer to, let's say, a piece of paper where you write down one idea that you think is going to change the way that you look at things? And
Mm.
that's the only small step that I'm going to take. And for the other side, for the people who are like very excited about bringing on change, it also becomes challenging because for them, there is no end. Well, there has to be some containment to that because it becomes a big experimental space where everybody wants to try out different things. Well, it has to be contained somehow. So,
Mm.
can we try a couple of things that work? If not, let's try to find the next thing that might bring on the taking the shoulder forward of making changes. It's all about understanding what expectations are people coming with, and
Mm.
even if there is resistance, instead of saying yes, you need to change, I often try to say, I understand you don't want to change. If I were in your position, I also wouldn't want to change. But can you
Mm.
accompany me for next 2 hours? That's the only thing I ask you for in a workshop or in a discussion. Only for next 2 hours. I'm not asking next 2 years. Can you accompany me till there? And if it's okay, if you still feel you don't feel the need to change, I'm with you and no discussions forward from there. Because I
Mm.
think resistance to resistance makes it harder. So I
Yeah.
think acceptance and making people comfortable with those thoughts makes it a little bit easier. Because at the end of the day, people who are resisting also have something that has not been addressed with them in the past. Probably some idea not heard, probably something that didn't go through, something they're afraid of. Why resist that? I rather
Mm.
see this as an invitation to make it easier for them because once they agree to it, I'm sure the rest of the table will too.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that reminds me a little bit of one of the talks in the Service Design Global Conference, where they're
Mhm,
talking about being bold and
mhm,
about this soldier or scout mentality, right?
mhm,
So, really defending your idea or defending your mindset to death as a soldier, or
mhm.
being a little bit more of a scout and trying to explore around. And it feels a little bit what you're saying, that if you have somebody with a scout mentality that just gets the soldier on the arm and you're just walking together, then you're kind of going together into this journey. And it's not
Absolutely.
like so you were alone with your mindset, but we're trying to understand how we can work together on this.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And it does become a little bit easier. And I have to say, those are the discussions that I find most fruitful, where the most resistance was met initially, because the best ideas often come from there.
True, true. Also, because maybe people that were the most resistant are the ones that have taken the longer to change. And
Mhm.
then there's maybe already a lot of things that maybe came around, but they didn't, they resisted the change and resisted the change. And now there's kind of an accumulation maybe of
Mhm.
different ideas and conversations that were never done in this past.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's difficult, I think, to expect that people are going to be 100% ready to make the changes right away or 100% on board. I don't think anybody can be 100% on board. Even for myself, while walking into a workshop, there is no way of knowing I know exactly what I'm going to do. No,
Mm,
it's going to uncover how things are going to go. So, me giving a false expectation or hope that this is going to solve 100% is already a rough start to what's going to come on later. So
mm,
why don't we meet exactly honestly where we are, trying to find the best way out? Let's see what that's going to look like. Even I don't have answers to that. And
mm,
that becomes easier for people to accept.
mm. That's good. And do you have any suggestions for anybody that's listening right now for different methods that you use or different strategies that you might try to employ to make this space of curiosity and safety and kind of a scout mentality also?
I mean, there are so many methods, tools out there, so many ways to feel more comfortable in the way that you were doing. What I often This is something I feel that has often helped me a lot. Actually, being honest with myself about the work that I'm doing and
Mm,
seeing the best way forward. Because with all the methods and tools that I've learned so far, believe me, they have been super helpful with all the things that have worked. But at some point, it was also acknowledging the tools are there to help me, so let me find the best way that I see this working in. And I don't be afraid to juggle a number of tools or methods around. So there
mhm,
is no rule book of saying this is how things need to be done and that you need to follow exactly this order. I think the more chaotic things have been, the more it gave me opportunity to apply different tools and methods to way things could be solved or challenges could be addressed. So I would say try to be a bit more playful with the way that with the work that you were doing, or try to be a bit more trying to do something that challenges the way things have been done so far. So, to give you a very small example, there was something I was working in terms of a project to bring people together, and these teams had just recently met, and they knew each other partially, didn't know each other that closely, and we were discussing how can we bring it a bit more creatively together. How can we somehow make it easier for people to cross the threshold of making discussions or interactions? At the end of the day, we went with the boldest idea of creating portraits of one another. And
mm,
the whole team sat down and worked and created portraits and left messages for one another. And that was the kickoff of a 3 day intense workshop. Well,
mm,
some people might think, well, it's just creating portraits. If you really think about it, it actually opened doors for people to take notice of the other person more closely. It gave them a chance to sit next to them and be more comfortable in each other's presence. And that made the next discussion a lot more easier. And there is no rule book for this, but this is what it felt normal or natural to connect with people. And this is what I mean by being a little bit more playful and a bit bold. This scared me, don't get me wrong, this scared me a lot. But it
yeah.
also is helpful because you share that with other people. So, and then when you ask people, can you tell me a little bit more about your pains, your challenges, your gains, your aspirations? You already sense a little bit more honesty in the discussion. You sense
Mm,
that people are open to doing that. Other thing I would suggest is being honest with yourself and the group that you're working with. So
mm,
oftentimes when we're working in intense long discussions, you can see people are getting tired. You can see energy is taking over. The discussion is really burning out the energy in the room. Why try to push through? Why not tell them, all right, I see the energy is burning down. How about we take a 10-minute break and you tell me how you want to move forward after 10 minutes?
mm,
Now that's a room people can own. That's a
Yeah.
room people feel comfortable in because now they have the power and the voice to decide what the next step is going to look like. Because at the end of the day, our role as a facilitator, I feel, and the people who are driving such processes, to help them move forward. It's to help. And we can't receive help if you can't ask for it. So
Mm,
that's, I found super helpful in terms of the way that I work with people, being honest about it.
mm,
And lastly, be less critical of the way things are getting done. Oftentimes, our own voices is like, oh my God, this is going really bad. This is going really good. I don't know what's happening. Well, all of that is valid and absolutely true. And that's how things work. There is
mm,
no right way or absolute correct way of knowing how things are working. It all comes through as a process. And as people who are enabling change in organizations and navigating uncertainty every single day, being uncertain yourself is a big part of it. So
mm.
embrace that you will not have answers to it, but your uncertainty is where your power lies.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And I think now I'll also open for anybody that's online to ask any questions if you have for Aditi on this topic. I think it's a great topic to have. We all, as designers, are kind of facilitators per se because we're always in a room where we're probably not the experts, right? We're working with people in healthcare, we're working with people in public services, we're working with
Mhm.
people in education, and they are the owners of that information, right? So, um, I don't know. I would just ask to start a little bit the Q&A section.
Mhm.
Um, what are some of the learnings, maybe more on this kind of health section that you're working on, that
Mhm.
you would say people can take about other areas that they might be working as designers?
I think one of the key learnings that I've had working in a space like this is knowing that people will not understand everything that you're doing right away.
Mm,
What I spoke about a little bit earlier, the language, the tools, the things that you're talking about, it's okay if it takes a little bit of time to build that momentum. Our task is not to get them fully on board. Our task is to make them understand that a bit more clearly and easily. So embrace and try to understand how can you simplify it for other people, how can you make it so easy for them to understand that the next time when they sit in a discussion with you, that terminology doesn't sound strange to them, or the
mm,
process doesn't sound strange to them. And even if it means replacing words in the way that they understand better, is absolutely okay to do that. So you don't have to call it a journey mapping flow of understanding how the flow works out. If they say it's step by step process, let's call it a step by step process,
mm.
because the purpose is to get clarity, not to make them experts in the tools and methods that we are working with.
Yeah, of course. I think the language aspect kind of summarizes it quite a bit, right? You have to understand that people are from different cultures. They maybe are
Mhm.
not, they're speaking a second, third language, so they might using other terms. They have different background, different biases. So you always have to take those into consideration. Then we
Absolutely.
have a question here from, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Shruti. In a large company, how do you suggest to drive innovation topics using design thinking methods? What are the key points here? There.
Driving innovation topics using design thinking methods in large organizations come with large challenges. I think that's one of the key things that we are tackling these days, that often topics are really, really big. One of the key ways of getting started with is, where are the small pockets to get us started? What are the key little streams wherein you can already identify, well, this sounds a little bit like we don't have clarity here, or might use a little bit of user-centered approach. Can we try a bit of experimentation here? Can we see how things can be picked up from a space of user centricity? So instead of going full bang and 100% into large topics, what are the smaller topics that we can identify? First, it makes you get a sense of, what are people's acceptance of maturity around the topic? How familiar are they with it? So you get a sense of that. And secondly, that helps build your own trust working with the people. That, we tried it here, maybe we can try it in another space. So starting small but sustainable impact. That, I would say, is one of the key things I acknowledge while working on big topics.
That's great. And then we also have a question from Kasia that she's asking, how do you stay on the right depth of discussion, especially when the specialization is deep and participants have a shorthand and lingual? How do you choose when to interrupt and step in? What helps you to provide clarity for yourself to moderate the discussion? and it got cut off.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
to moderate the discussion. Yeah, I just got off on the last letter.
that's a very good question. Identifying the right depth of the discussion. I think this is something as a practice we do initially before starting off a discussion. Where is it that we actually want to end up with? What is the purpose of doing this discussion? What are the key takeaways or key goals that you would like to accomplish by making this discussion? Because that already gives you a scope of what are the people's expectations in terms of the outcome that they want to walk away with after these 2 or 3 hours. Once you know that, let's identify what is actually stopping you from getting there. And this is where the challenges start to unfold. Well, we have this challenge and this challenge and this challenge. And this is generally where the rumination happens because problems, well, once we start talking about it, it just starts to intensify, right? So, this is where identification of the right depth becomes important. Generally, as a rule of practice, I always circle back to is this helping us move forward where we want to? If not, this is a topic for some time later. Because if it has no role to play in where we want to go, it's not the right time to pick it up. And this helps navigate the depth of the discussion. Secondly, what is it that is this topic in terms of if people are bringing it up again and again, has to contribute to this topic? There might be another big topic building up, and then take that forward as, let's say, point A, point B of discussion for another time, because it seems significant and could help move forward. In these conversations, it's really difficult to stop people when they're right in the middle of an intense discussion. But what always helps is letting them know they are deciding of what energy and time are they putting right now in this whole scope of things. So we can continue the same topic for another 30 minutes if it's that's important, or we can spend the time in finding our path forward. Giving that choice to the participants always makes them a more clearer path of how do you want to move. And this is a choice I leave it at the hand of the group. And more often than not, it's always a choice to move forward because then they understand it has no impact in how we want to move forward. I hope that answers your question, Kasia.
Yeah. So I think that's all the time that we had for today. So thank you very much for all your insights and for everybody that asked questions. If there's any other questions, feel free to drop them in, tagging Aditi, and then hopefully she can talk with you more about it. But thank you very much for your time and for being
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on board. Love the discussion. Thank you.
here. Thank you. And to everybody that joined us online, that asked any questions and was here, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to start again this 2025 season of SDN Community Voices with our weekly conversations. So stay connected with us in our socials for updates on any future episodes. And I hope to see you all actually next Tuesday. We're going to have a special interview, and you're going to get some more information about that tomorrow. So thank you very much for joining, and have a good rest of the week.